Hello and welcome to Culture Conversations. I'm Craig Foreman, your guide through the ever-evolving world of organizational culture. Here we engage in real, unscripted conversations with the changemakers actively shaping our workplaces. From innovative strategies to heartfelt insights, each conversation is a step towards making work better for us all. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Culture Conversations. Hello and welcome to Culture Conversations. I am so excited. My guest today is Anna Binder. Anna is the head of people operations at Asana, where she's been there since 2016. She joined when they were close to 100 employees. They've grown to close to, if not over, 1,800 employees. And under her leadership, Asana has been recognized as the best workplace for both Inc. magazine and Fortune for 4 consecutive years. And in 2021 was named Best Place to Work by Glassdoor. All amazing recognitions of the work her and her team and that organization have done. Before joining Asana, she worked as the VP of People at MuleSoft. She's known for her commitment to building a culture powered by clarity, co-creation, and inclusion, and for her belief in the importance of connecting people to a company's values and mission. She also sits on the board of directors with Culture Amp, and is always advocating for using business and culture practices to drive success and performance inside of organizations. On a more personal note, I clearly remember the first time I met Anna because I was invited to speak at a mental wellness program that was being put on at the Asana offices. And after I was done speaking, one of her team members came up to me and said, "Anna Binder, the head of people here, would like to talk to you." And immediately I thought, what's going on? And did I do something wrong? And all that, like I'm going to the principal's office. So a few minutes later, they escorted me through the building to her office. They sat me down and I waited for a few minutes. Again, like what's happening here? Am I in trouble? And Anna came in with a couple of her teammates and they sat down and immediately the energy shifted. It was warm, it was welcoming. And she said, we used the tools at Culture Amp and she had questions. She wanted to dig in a little more and honestly was asking me questions and was curious and wanted to learn from me. And it was such a shift. And I'll never forget that transition of energy. It was a funny story that turned into a really powerful moment. But her curiosity and her thoughtfulness and the questions she was asking really stuck with me. And we went on. I got to know Anna. I've interviewed her a few times, and every time I do, I'm inspired by her perspective and how she approaches and thinks about this work. I was involved as she was getting closer to Culture Amp, eventually becoming part of our board, which I knew we had leveled up when that happened because, what a great addition. So it was amazing to have her agree and to come here today. In our conversation, there's a couple things that we hit on. One is the evolution of organizational culture. So what do we hold on to and what do we let go of as organizations grow or shrink or are faced with different situations as we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years, particularly. Also embracing AI in the workplace, which is unique because she's thinking about it with her employees, but also works for an organization that is thinking about it and how to support other workplaces with this, and the future of leadership and innovation. So I'm so excited to share this conversation with you, and let's get to it. Anna Binder, welcome to Culture Conversations.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you're here with me. You are somebody that I've always appreciated in my world, and so happy to have this conversation with you. Let's get right to it. Before we jump in, I was thinking about starting. Here it is, the beginning of 2024. If there was one word, if you had to distill your thinking ahead, 2024, what's the word on your mind right now as we head into 2024?
Optimistic.
Optimistic. Say a little more.
I mean, I should probably, preface it. I am, people talk about being a glass half full or a glass half empty person. I am the water tastes amazing person. I feel really lucky. I feel really happy about the work that I get to do. I'm super curious about the future. It happens, we're having this conversation in January, which is like New Year's season, one of my favorite times of the year. You get to both reflect on the time that you just had and think about your intentions or goals for the future. I love this, and I'm looking forward to another year.
Yay, me too. I'm optimistic about 2024. When I wrote that question down, I was thinking to myself, what would my word be? And I think my word right now is transformation. That's the word this year.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, you're right. As my career continues to grow and evolve, but also it seems to be the word feel like resilience organizationally used to be and now it's about transformation, that it's time to look forward and how are we truly embracing transformation in our organizations, because the world is changing. It's time for, as we know, our workplaces to continue to evolve and catch up. So that just felt like the right word for me.
I love it. I love it. I recently had a conversation with somebody about resilience, and he kind of reframed it for me of what, when you hear the word resilience, like the image that comes to mind is somebody kind of being beaten up, right? And like holding it strong and not like, and that's not a very positive image, right? And it is true. That's what, like, that word triggers for me. And he kind of reframed it for me as grit, which is a much more proactive word, a much more motion, like an in motion word. And let's be real. It's not all sunshine and rainbows and puppy dogs, and things can get hard personally and professionally. And I like thinking about navigating with grit as opposed to surviving with resilience.
I agree with you. And even when you framed it that way, when you said that word about being beat up, and that to me was right after the pandemic, right? That we were getting beat up. It all happened so fast, and we have to move through that word and onto something more optimistic, more positive. Yeah. So I agree. Okay, so let's kick it off. You and I have had a relationship. I've gotten to know you. I've interviewed you in the past, and I was thinking about us meeting, and I had this very clear. I remember I had brought you in and we were talking, and it was probably about 2 years ago, and we were talking about, as organizations grow and change, what do we need to hold on to? What do we need to let go of? And I wanted to, as you were coming back, and I'm thinking about today in our current environment, right, that our organizations have, a lot of organizations, I imagine, I don't want to assume, but I imagine you've been impacted and been through some tough times and economic. I want to flip the question, ask the same question. What do organizations thinking about culture as we go through difficult times, as maybe we downsize, as it's not the same world that when I talked to you 2 years ago about that. So it's the same question. What do we hold on to? What do we let go of? How do we think about it? And I love that we have this history. So like the same question as we go through time. Now, what should we be thinking about as we adapt and evolve our cultures? What stays, what gets let go of, and all of that. So I'll just open with the question in general, and I'd love to hear your take on it.
It's so funny as I'm thinking about answering this. The image that comes to mind is those Sunday morning news shows where they have somebody on the program and they're like, play a clip of something that they said 2 years ago and hold them to account. So I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people that can go back and listen to myself talk, because I fall into the majority where that just makes me cringe. So you'll just let me know how this compares to what I said in the past. I mean, the things that I hold true, whether the time, you're in the go-go disco times or you're in the resizing times, whether, I've been at Asana since we were 100 people, we're, marching towards 2000. Some of these things that hold true no matter what. The first is just like my philosophy or my vision of what we're doing here. And to me, that kind of summed up in I focus on the culture, and we build a strong culture because we believe that it drives business results. That, like, there's no other reason. You might come up, you might have a long list. That's my reason. That's why. And the business exists to achieve the mission. So culture drives business exists to achieve the mission. And so it's a beautiful, thread through that keeps you grounded in making tough decisions. Mm-hmm. As part of that, I've always worked in product companies. And I think about building culture like a product, right? Like what is the end goal that I have with this program, with this policy, with this communication? What am I trying to create? What's the outcome? And then build backwards from there. Like, how am I going to move the needle on this thing with my program? And, me, like all of you all, have done that work and then made mistakes. So you got to go out there, like, see how your program is like landing in the wild, listening to employees about like what the reaction is, what the externalities are, what the unintended consequences are, and fix the bugs and keep doing it over and over and over again. And that's how you build great product, right? With continual like thinking about the end user before you build, then getting continual feedback as your product is out in the wild, and then and it never ends. And I think that product builders very much have that mentality, and culture builders, successful culture builders have that as well. The second thing that I think is really true is my primary job is a communications job. I think of myself as the chief communications officer, small, medium, big. When you're 100 people, you can reach people individually. When you're hundreds of people, you're leveraging all different kinds of tools, including communicating through your managers. And when you're a couple thousand people or 20,000, like you constantly have to evolve how you do it. But there's nothing more important in your work than that.
Right. I mean, we've said that before, and I work with organizations on, which we'll go back to the listening that you picked up on, is so many organizations do a good job listening and coming up with plans and don't communicate. And it saddens me because I know from the surveys and working with populations that there's companies that are doing great work, but they're not communicating well, and they're having the negative effect because people just don't understand that.
Yep.
They're being, it's so funny. The simple part of I don't want to undermine it, but the communication part gets missed while all this hard work's being done to iterate. And if you don't communicate, sometimes the perception is more dangerous than even what's being done.
Yeah. I think of it. A lot of sales leaders will say in managing their sort of like weekly forecast, if it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. Like if you've got a lead, if you've got a prospect, if you've got a deal and you haven't logged it, it's as if it's zero. And some people live like a very strict rule around that. And I think about applying it to communications. The last thing that I think is really important for people yes, this has been true forever, but it's becoming more true. There's so much uncertainty. Mm-hmm. There's, short-term domestic political uncertainty. There's long-term geopolitical uncertainty and unrest. AI is creating some really unknown unknowns. The macroeconomic situation is hard to predict on the slope of the curve. The only thing that we can do is get stronger at being flexible. Mm-hmm. That's all we can do. And I think that the organizations of the future are going to see that as a skill, not just for leaders and managers, but for employees.
It's amazing. Yeah. And I'm just reminded of, you put things in words sometimes that are, the way you synthesize it. And I couldn't agree more. And one of the things you hit on too, and I just have to go back to hit on this because it falls into my world so much, trying to communicate to organizations the power of listening and data, and not as a boring thing, but as this iterative process. And I think what you said about the product, I think you just summarized it really well. Product people do this intuitively. And I think I've seen that, but not connected the dots on when you're working with leaders and bringing data to the table, but it's continual data that we're listening all the time and listening and iterating. And to the original question of change, and something we've talked about in the past is you're always going to change. There's no final state. Therefore, that especially as we're distributed and employees everywhere, that companies being really strong at listening and quantifying, listening at scale, and I also think listening at individual level, they're both important, and making that a muscle like a product person does, especially in technology and probably everywhere now, the constant listening and iteration of your product, and in your case, culture.
Yeah. I mean, and the information changes, right? And like people change and marketplaces change, and being able to listen well. And I do I think that the people function can sometimes be quite lonely, in the sense that you don't get a lot of credit when things go well, and when things go wrong, you are on it. And which can naturally create some fear, or like the lack of courage to say, hey, we published this, it worked for a while, then we learned this, now we're evolving. And I don't think that's an admission of maybe like, I don't know, actually, is it an admission of a mistake? Did you make a mistake? It doesn't matter. Like we
Mistake.
got to,
Even that ideology of mistake, right? It's iteration means you have to embrace mistakes. That's part of the journey.
yeah. And it's, I think part of the reason that, I love this work goes back to my sort of innate optimism. Like it's a pleasure to be able to like redo it and fix it and improve it. I like genuinely like that.
So as you're speaking, this wasn't on my original like list, but I have to ask this question, right? And I think you know it and I know it. Particular senior HR roles in general, senior HR roles over the last few years have been really hard for people. And you talk about being lonely, and I'm listening to you and your excitement, and it's, which is not always the case. That a lot of people in this space it's been really challenging. What would you say to that? How have you navigated through these challenging times? I mean, this is taking a particular toll on our HR teams. I think you hit on that a little bit about how when things go bad, or, between the COVID and the economic situation and social justice, what's been your approach to that? And I'm sure a lot of people in your community, you know what I'm talking about, I imagine, just how tough it's been and how hard it's been on people. How have you navigated through it? And stayed, positive and energized, and maybe share to other senior HR people?
Well, it's so great. It's lovely to be able to talk about it in hindsight a little bit, right? Because I do believe, like, the COVID George Floyd murder, the January 6th, like, I don't think we realized how tough it was until we started looking back at it, right?
I'm getting chills a little bit when you say it like that, just thinking what you went through.
But when I joined Asana, I had several criteria about what I was looking for in my next position. I wanted a product or service that would have a meaningfully positive impact in the world in some way. I didn't have to be like, it would be nice, right? Like it was just, we're going to eliminate climate change in a year. But like, I just needed to feel like it was net positive. Number two, I wanted a CEO who saw culture as a driver of business outcome. I wanted to be small enough that I could have impact, but not so small that I was doing hand-to-hand combat on like recruiting like myself, right? So these things, those were the things that were important to me, and they're still the things that are important to me, right? Like, do I believe in the product? One of the beautiful things about working at Asana is that the value proposition of the company, of the product for our customers, is so directly tied to what we're trying to build as a culture. Being able to play at that level and like connect those dots so innately is incredibly powerful. Number two, I work for a guy who really believes in the work that I do and is hands down the best partner in this work that I've ever had. In good days and in bad days, I feel like we're in it together, and that's irreplaceable. And then number three, I know it sounds trite, but team. At Asana, the executive team, for the most part, has been pretty cohesive. There's been very little turnover. It's a tight team. And I think it's underestimated how valuable it is to work with a set of individuals for years and years and years. And by the way, the same is true of my directs. I've had just a solid team for a long time. And those, I have a phrase at work and at home, there's nobody I'd rather be doing this with. And I genuinely mean it when I talk about the team I serve on, the team I lead, and the team that is my roommates at home. Like I really believe that.
I hope so. I love that answer too, because you answered the question from an HR practitioner, but you also answered it in a very authentic way from probably an anybody culture perspective of why we're trying to build great cultures. And I think sometimes it's the hard time. It's hard, especially if you have a lot of turnover and everybody's focused just on results, to see that and focus on the value of what people do when they're with people they care about, they trust, they feel safe around, they feel supported by. And those are those hard to quantify things that I think my work in trying to help organizations get to of like, there's a value in that. And you don't always get it quarterly, but that was your answer. Your answer wasn't, well, I meditated and I did these things. Your answer was, I haven't had turnover. How many people and senior like leaders of yourself over 4 years can say that right now? Probably not many. I mean, I was at an event the other day where a CHRO said that she's had 3 CEOs since COVID and the team is almost transformed. I just think about the emotional tax, the inefficiency that comes with that before you can even get to the work.
It's, I mean, those people have skills and capabilities that I don't have. I think that would break me.
Resilience.
Yeah, now that actually does sound like the need for resilience.
But I'm just happy you said it that way. And it's a reminder to what we're really working for here and what we hope for most people, that they can work in that environment. Because I think humans become our best and figure out how to be successful when we feel that way about our teams.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking earlier, like I feel like I hit the jackpot. I love this work out loud, and I love doing it at a company where it is so core to the offering. I'm coming up on 8 years, celebrating 8 years here at Asana. I feel really lucky. And I also feel like I'm very, how do you say, like I have a big appetite. I have so many more things that I want to accomplish here. So, which also makes me optimistic and enthusiastic.
What? You willing to share one or two?
Yeah, this, I mean, I'll share more than one or two. If you talk to anybody in an interview, and I always have the same question. My first question is always the same. What is in your heart? When you think about the 3 or 4 things that are the most important to you in your next opportunity, what are they? Like, what is truly in your heart? And the 2 things that come up over and over and over again is I want to have impact, and I want to grow. Like, and people will say some other things, like more specific things, but like if I think about the 1,000 times I've asked the question, those are the 2. And one of the things that I'm interested in today, everybody is a tiny little bit AI curious, right? If you look on the spectrum, there are some hardcore believers that are using it every day in some way. There's some in the middle, but everybody's like, let me learn more, right? Like, let me understand more, and maybe a little nervous about what it means, but everybody's got some. And I think that the future, and particularly in the next couple of years, how we use AI as knowledge workers is going to fundamentally transform how we do our work, what we're doing, what kind of impact we're having. And it is going to be like the differentiator in growth. So when I talk to Asanas, I'm like, today we got some stuff in the product, you got ChatGPT, you got all these different components. And today we're using it this much, just a little bit. If you fast forward to 2 years, nobody's going to be able to do their job without it. And I want to accelerate that for Asana employees. I want people at the end of this year to feel like, hey, I went from like a novice to an expert. Hey, I went from like experimenting to transforming my workflows. I went from curious to confident. That is something that I want. And I don't pretend to be an expert here. I want that for myself as well. And I want to be on that journey together.
You must have known where I'm going. I don't think we can have these conversations anymore without AI, but, so my next topic is AI. So we'll roll into AI with that, but to hear from a leader in an organization, this is being discussed so much right now. So it's just, let's continue down the path of AI and just to hear how you're embracing it. But when you were talking, something I heard recently, it was a panel. There was somebody from Google who was talking about AI, and they were addressing the idea of people losing jobs and all that. And I think there's a space to have that conversation, because I think there's going to be a massive change. But their point was, what he said was, AI is not going to replace lawyers. Lawyers that use AI are going to replace lawyers. And I thought that was really interesting, like thinking like a reframing of the importance that we need to learn to leverage it, and that those that don't will probably be in more of a situation. I thought that was really powerful, but also, you know, what this means. And the other thing that comes up for me that I've ventured into a journey of entrepreneurship as this is blossoming, which is I feel like pushed me further than sometimes people I talked to inside of organizations that are like needing to leverage it. And where I'm going with that is productivity. It blows me away some of the things I can do, a contract, you know, an email where I just get the thoughts out and I can get the email together and keep moving quickly. So I think the productivity question is interesting. And the last thing I'll throw in there, and I'll get your feedback. One of the big stories, which is I think it's catchy and headliney, but I think it speaks to the productivity piece, is right now, like any new technology, one of the phenomena we're seeing, particularly in technology, is some technologists are having 2, 3, and even 4 jobs because they know how to use it really well, and they can take mid-level jobs, leverage the tool, and do that. To me, as much as that's a fun story about how people are gaming a system, it's also speaking about productivity and these tools and what that means. And my belief is organizations will catch up as well and be like, okay, do we need as many? So all of those, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Let's go deeper into the AI question, because you're at the front lines thinking about it in your product and with your people.
Yeah. I love that quote that you just gave. Lawyers will not be replaced by AI. Lawyers that use AI will replace lawyers. So whoever said that, I'm going to quote you. I'm going to insert other functions into that. I love that. And, we generally, we very explicitly have a belief here at Asana that AI can amplify what makes us the most human. Like, it's not, there will be some replacement of work, but that just opens up for us to do bigger and better work. At a very simple level, like helping to automate repetitive, low value work so that teams can focus on the complex, the creative, and, more importantly, I think that this is given short shrift, like create a little bit of gray space that allows for, or white space that allows for creativity and innovation. That's not, it's hard to schedule, right? And creating more space for it is very valuable.
I'll share this is anecdotal. It's just my journey. Working more alone. One of the things that I'm realizing I've missed is, coming up corporate, all the team and the collaboration. Mm-hmm. And I did not set out to find this, but I had this aha at one point when I was building a program and a facilitation. And I found myself going back and forth with ChatGPT. And when it was over, it felt like I collaborated.
Oh, and how great is that? AI is on the team.
I was still the expert. I'm the one driving the conversation. I'm the one, I know what I'm thinking, but I'm like, I'm thinking about this, some ideas, and it comes back. Well, what about that? And it was something to bounce it off of. And I realized as somebody that's creative, that's social, that in a moment when I was craving something, it's just the practice of bouncing something back and forth. It was a strange epiphany, and I don't want to say like, oh, it's my new friend and we just talk all the time. It wasn't that, but it was the collaboration, the act of collaboration for my brain with something.
Yeah, made it a little bit less lonely.
It's not so weird to say, but that was just one of those aha. Like, I'm just going through this journey like anybody, not really setting out in any one direction, and that was one of those moments where I just flowed and looked back and said, wow, that was the experience I had.
Yeah, that's and it's been a little bit of fun journey here at Asana. One of the things that makes our product unique and it's kind of differentiated from competition is something we call the work graph data model, which really ensures that the data is not siloed and it is connected to each other in a very simple explanation, right? Like I can have a task, you and I can be on the task together, but I might have that task multi-homed into another project so that the relevant collaborators there can experience it. And I don't have to, I can easily multi-home. I don't have to maintain 2 separate instances, and I don't have to update 2 separate instances when information changes.
It makes us realize all of the legwork that we do. It's not really part of our jobs. It's just that goes along with it.
It's the work about work. And so for us, that has been that unique differentiator has allowed us to accelerate the innovation using AI. And we just really feel like the collaborative work has allowed us to leverage some of these AI tools incredibly. Literally just this morning, we are entering performance management season, my favorite and least favorite time of the year. But I asked the AI product in Asana to look across all of the work that I've done over the course of 11 months and say, what are the most important things that I worked on with this one colleague? What did we achieve together? And, a sixth of a second later, I had 5 ideas. 3 of those ideas, I was like, yes, I remember that. That was great. One of those ideas, I was like, that was so long ago. I've completely forgotten about it. Like, what a good reminder. And one of them was like, no. Like, that's not right. But what an incredible hit rate. And I'm not like, I'm just using the tool that I use to do all my work every day. And it created that. And I think that's powerful from a productivity perspective. I think it's powerful from a completeness perspective. But I think it has interesting inclusion benefits, right? Because there are some people who are like, oh yeah, I achieved, the folks that are like, I achieved these 17 things, even though they were like one member of the team. And there are some people who are like, well, I didn't really achieve that much. I was just part of that team. I didn't lead it. And what an amazing way to help the people who sort of underestimate and undervalue their work, which you can imagine is more prevalent in groups of people from underrepresented groups. So I'm just, again, excited about the possibility.
The leveling, I think there are all kinds of skills, like with interviewing. Some people, are you the best person? Are you the best interviewer? I think when it comes to performance management, some people do a better job of synthesizing and promoting themselves. And I used to always, every 6 months at Culture Amp, we would do performance cycle. And I got in the habit, what I do is open my calendar, go back 6 months and walk through week by week. And I always blew my mind how much when I started the process, I forgot about when I got to the end. And to your point, it's that leveling of like, of course I made an accomplishment. I just don't, it's that recency. I remember the last month. And that's what I hope, is that there's a leveling. Like, maybe I'm not the best writer, but I got great ideas. How much has that held me back? Or I have ADHD, so many thoughts to get them out. But now if I can just get them out in any form or shape, and then I can go back and So to me, it's the leveling of the areas where we're not strong. The other thing that on that same panel, what they said, and I thought this was interesting, in the research that Google did, what they're finding, at least at this point, was that, let's say you're a coder. AI makes a bad coder average, makes an average coder good. It doesn't do much for a great coder. And the point was, don't look at this so much from scarcity, is that if you're really great at something, you probably won't need it. You're already really good at it. But we all have areas where we're not so good, and it can level up the things that we don't. Everybody's got, I don't write good emails. I'm not so hot in this way, or doing a presentation. Can you use it to, instead of seeing it as an enemy, use it to level up the areas where we're average?
Yeah. That's now that is optimism, right? And it's optimism that I can believe in.
Okay, so one last question. We'll do this quickly because we're at time here, and that is, we started by saying 2 years ago we spoke, and then we talked about now. If I just ask the question, and let's just have fun with this. This is the predictor mind. If we're talking in 2 years, what do you think we'll be talking about?
Oh my gosh! Well, we're going to be experts in AI.
Yeah, we'll have to.
We're going to leapfrog ourselves in impact, because so much of the work about work is going to be reduced. Our flexibility is going to be very strong. Nothing's going to surprise us. I guess I do have 2 concerns.
Mm-hmm.
The first is I'm concerned about loneliness. I'm concerned about particularly introverts who are reveling in working from home. and weren't forced into that zone of uncomfort in terms of their interaction? What is long-term loneliness as an affliction look like? I'm curious. I think the combination of the up and coming generation and the pandemic has led for a lot of people, younger people, to like sort of take their career into a lower gear. You know, the waves of resignations, the traveling, the working from anywhere, the reprioritization. I think we have a lot to learn from younger people as it relates to that prioritization. And I wonder if there's an entire generation of people who aren't driven by grabbing the ring and like going for it. Who's going to grab the ring, and what will leadership look like? What will success look like? Will it impact innovation negatively? Will it impact innovation positively? I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to answer that now, but I think what it does highlight is how much is going to change in 2 years, which is if we met 7 years ago, we wouldn't have like that. And it'll be fun to meet with you in 2 years, and we can look back at what you just said now and compare it. So, Anna, it's always such a pleasure. I knew time would fly as it did. And the spirit of this podcast is conversations and inviting people that I can do this with. So I really just appreciate you taking the time, trusting me, and us having a conversation. Like, there's no place where we're supposed to go, and I hope there's more conversations and we continue to move this forward.
Love it. I always love chatting with you.
Oh, thank you.